from his vantage point, there is one church.
Yes.
Right.
Very good.
And we might not live out the implications of this union and unity we have in Jesus Christ on a horizontal level.
Right.
But it's no less true that the church is, right, every tribe and tongue and people.
My guest today is Irwyn Ince, who's been my friend for just about a decade by now. He is the brand new coordinator of mission in North America for the Presbyterian Church in America. He's thought deeply about race, racial reconciliation, and justice. I talk to him every month about what the Bible has to say and what we should think and do about ethnic issues and inequity issues in America, and I'm delighted to have a conversation with him today. From the Center for Faith and Work here in St. Louis, this is Working with me, your host, Dan Doriani. Here we strive to fire the imagination of Christians who long to practice their faith in the workplace. Through conversations with doctors, athletes, teachers, executives, and more, we seek to engage those who desire to do significant work, to practice love and justice in their work, and who dare to change their corner of the world through that work. Well, today I'm with my friend Irwyn Ince. Irwyn, we've known each other for a little while now. We've worked on things, and we are working on things.
Yes, that's right.
We're working on a project that might have the subtitle, An African American, Asian American, and Irish Jew Have a Conversation About Race.
Yeah.
And we've been talking every 3 weeks for a while. And I'm really excited to have you on our podcast. This is a faith and work podcast. It's not technically about social issues, but your work is racial reconciliation, and you're a pastor.
Yes, I am.
You're ordained, but your work isn't strictly pastoral like preaching every Sunday.
That's right.
It's helping the church to be more multicultural. And one of the things you say that is striking is that 80% of all churches are functionally or virtually monocultural. Give us an overture to what you do.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
I'm delighted to have you, Irwyn.
I lead an organization called the Grace DC Institute for Cross-Cultural Mission. And we describe our work this way, and my work and my passion, equipping Christian churches and organizations with the competence and confidence to welcome others the way Jesus welcomes us. So we're really engaged in this idea of the ministry of reconciliation, unity and diversity across lines of difference in and under the lordship of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And so very often, so the space of our work is we're not working to try to convince organizations that they should be pursuing.
They already believe it. They want to know how to do it.
Exactly.
Yep.
You got it.
That's good. So in a sense, what you're doing is picking up on Jesus, who, had this funny tendency to say really nice things about Samaritans, who were about as other as you could get.
Yeah.
Parable of the Good Samaritan, the Grateful Samaritan.
Yes, right.
And the gospel goes to Samaria.
Yes.
And then the first church that sent missionaries, Antioch, which had Simeon called Niger. And it had somebody from Herod's household or entourage, and Lucius of Cyrene, which is a Roman name, as well as people like Barnabas, Jewish. So very multicultural church in the beginning. How do we get back there? It was always supposed to be that way, right?
That's right. So let me say, in one sense, that, well, not in one sense, but God never loses.
Okay, yeah, right. But we don't. The victory isn't as clear all the time.
That's right. But from his vantage point, there is one church.
Yes.
Right.
Very good.
And we might not live out the implications of this union and unity we have in Jesus Christ on a horizontal level.
Right.
But it's no less true that the church is, right, every tribe and tongue and people, right? Even in its current manifestation, right? And so how do we get back to that on the ground reality of day-to-day life on life, what I like to call cross-cultural life and love in Jesus' name? It is first grasping that this is at the heart of, or this comes from the heart of God. Like seeing it in the scriptures. You've already talked about Antioch. You've already talked about how much Jesus talks about Samaria and Samaritans in positive ways.
When they were the scum, the dirt.
Good Samaritan.
Right, that's a contradiction.
What's that?
Yeah, right. In that culture.
In that culture, right. But seeing from the very beginning God's intent for humanity as his image, to be his image in community, unity and diversity, because God himself is unity and diversity, his Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Seems to be woven into creation.
It seems to be woven into creation.
Even birds, like there's so many kinds of scarlet tanagers and green and blue tanagers.
Is it George Manley Hopkins, the Pied Beauty poem? Glory be to God for dappled things.
Yes, right. Mm-hmm.
You know, somebody wrote, I think it was, I forget, but he said, God apparently loves diversity. He created so much of it in the world. Yeah, that's right. And so seeing this from the beginning will help us say, oh, this is not just some kind of, let's be relevant to the culture because the culture is talking about multiculturalism. It
was always there. Right. We lost it. We're coming back to it.
That's right.
That's how you and I see it.
That's right. And as followers of Jesus, we should be actually in the lead, demonstrating it.
Yeah. But the church wasn't always there. Your history, your personal history, we love it when God calls unbelievers, radicals, skeptics, atheists. You and I have some funny things. We both have some New York City roots.
Yes.
Both of our fathers are immigrants. First, we're second generation. Yep. And both of us were kind of atheists when we were real young. I was more like a heavy agnostic. I don't know. Maybe you were more like an agnostic too.
It's interesting. I always believed in spiritual things and a God or God.
Okay, so you were a deist of some kind.
I was a deist.
Okay. Yeah, I was an agnostic deist, I suppose. God probably exists because where does this all come from, but it doesn't really matter. But when you were a non-Christian, you cared deeply about what we today call racial issues. But not from a Christian perspective.
No, that's right.
So just tell us a couple words about how you were in it and how then how the Lord changed that passion and made it more holy and more consecrated to him.
Yeah, so I will say that I did grow up in the Christian church. Both my parents were believers, and but I rejected the faith as a teenager. And by the time I got to college, I became immersed in a Black nationalistic movement, and began to see the world through an overt racialized lens. That the things that mattered mostly were the things that had an impact on the lives of people of African descent, particularly in the United States of America.
Which is your story, of course. So, we tend to care about our story.
We tend to care about our story. That's right. But in this racialized view, I saw Christianity as the white man's religion. I saw it as a tool that was used to enslave and oppress people of African descent here in the United States. I wasn't all the way in line with the language that you would hear from people in the Nation of Islam who would say the white man is the devil, right? But I was listening to Nation of Islam speakers. The problem. Yeah, without question.
Not maybe.
Here was an area, a point of dissonance for me in trying to hold that view consistently.
Yes.
All right. 3 particular instances. On my mother's side of the family, I have an uncle who married a white woman. So I had a white aunt who lived right next door to me.
And you loved her?
And it's right. Her mother, Mrs. Kirsten, German roots, when I was a little boy, was just the kindest woman to me. Right.
Right.
I was always sneaking to go over house, give me some candy, Mrs. Ferguson at church, Dorothy Ferguson, also white woman European. At church, right? Always called me Master Irwyn Ince. She treated me with right? And then my uncle on my father's side in Trinidad married a white English woman when he did medical school in England. Okay. Married an English woman So I have biracial cousins on both sides of my family.
So your life is complicated.
So it's complicated. I'm sure, I'm in this kind of, and so it was always a point of kind of dissonance in trying to live that out consistently, this view.
But that was good. That was like sand in the Vaseline or a little pebble in your shoe that kept you from going too radical. Right. Yeah, but then the Lord called you to himself.
Mm-hmm, he did.
And they changed this concern from an angry concern to a loving, still passion.
Yes.
You're a passionate guy.
That's right.
But the goal is love, not
the goal is
anything else.
That's right. He changed. So the anger came from, I'm learning all of these things about the history of Black Americans that are hidden in plain sight. You go through the education system in the United States.
Maybe there's a paragraph.
And
Jim Crow laws.
You don't really have to. You don't have to know that for the test. That's right. That's right. Yeah, slavery was a bad thing, but it's over now. Civil rights, it fixed everything. Right. And so that brought on the anger. When the Lord called me to himself, then now I'm seeing the familial language that the scriptures use, talking about the people of God, right? It uses the language of family, like
all the time.
Father,
the time. Son, adoption, daughter.
All the time, right? And I started to say, wait a second, okay, like I see this in the scripture, but I go to church and literally everybody is Black. I was at a historic Black church.
Not one European person? One or two, three?
I cannot remember.
Basically none. Yeah. And a lot of European churches have, maybe have 5.
Yes.
For whatever reason, friendships or something.
That's right. And I say, well, I know there are historical reasons for this.
Yes.
But wait, why don't I see, hear, or experience anybody really talking about the imperative that we have for neighbor love, to love, and the fact that we don't get to discriminate on who's a neighbor and who's not.
Right.
Right. And particularly the demonstration in the scriptures that when the Spirit comes, he does reconciling.
Well, and the gospel's heard in the language of Cappadocians and Parthians and Medes and Elamites and everybody hears it in their own language. And of course, you're involved in a lot of things as I am. And military is totally interracial. Yep. The world of sports, which is where first, it doesn't matter what color you are. The question is, are you a good teammate? Right. Do you bring something to the game? And you notice that, on our team, whatever the team is, nobody cares if you're, Black or Hispanic or
gotta get it done.
Or
can you do the
European.
Yes. Great.
And yet it's like the sports teams have got it figured out. The military has it figured out. Some workplaces have it figured out and some don't. Mm-hmm. You want to comment on that? It's not, some workplaces are very, very interracial.
Right.
For-profit companies, I mean. And others are pretty monocultural too.
Yeah.
You want to say anything about that?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, look, if you're in a small town somewhere in the middle of Kansas that's, let's say, 92% Anglo, your church is going to be Anglo.
Yeah. That's right. Yes, that's right.
So there's nothing, and also the business will be Anglo because there aren't any non-Anglos to hire. But if you're in a multicultural place, then you want to have multicultural businesses, you would think.
Yes, right. Well, let me say a couple of things.
Yeah, okay.
Here. Let me back up and say and start by quoting one of my favorite theologians, Herman Bavinck.
Yep.
He talks about God, and he says, in God too, there's unity and diversity,
right.
Diversity and unity. This order and this harmony, he says, it exists in him absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
He says,
right.
But in the case of creatures, unity exists only by attraction. He said, by the will and the disposition of the will. He said, there's a moral unity that's fragile and unstable. He says, essentially, when you look at human beings, our unity is basically rooted in attraction. Who are the people we want to be with, and why?
Functionality, friendship,
That's right.
some of maybe
right.
artists, shared interests.
Yes, right.
And it's worth pointing out that Bavinck was Dutch.
Yes.
And
yes.
Dutch folk are a little monocultural, but it's also a tiny country. And they're, I don't know, when I was in the Netherlands, like, of course we know German. Everybody knows German. We're a tiny country. We have to know the languages of the people nearby because they are, coming to oppress us sometimes, and they know English too.
That's right.
So his comment cuts both ways.
Yes.
Sometimes you're forced into these things, and sometimes you choose it.
That's right.
I don't know which one it was. I don't know his history. The way maybe you do.
That's an interesting point. And I'd have to think more on it.
All I'm saying is things are complex.
But I bring it up because this is, so when you think about companies, businesses, the bottom line is the bottom line.
Yes, we need to make some money here.
I was in
you
industry.
Were in business, right?
I was an assistant engineer, right? Motorola. I remember my director having a meeting with our engineering department because we're designing systems for customers based on the customer's desires and specifications, and then the sales team would come in and say, I can't sell that. That's too much. Right? We gotta come in at this number. So you've got to cut out. And the engineers are saying, hey, look, they asked for this.
If we don't do this.
And if it doesn't, and our director would say, he had to mean, I remember he said, listen, cash is king. Cash is king, right? And so now, what that can often translate to in an organization is oftentimes what you might say is a necessary assimilation.
Yes.
But it's an assimilation to cultural norms and values.
Which kind of pushes ethnicity and race to the side because it's just not as important.
That's right. Now,
which is why those organizations tend to be colorblind, we might say.
Well, in
the safe sense of the word colorblind.
Well, but I do think that what happens is there is no way to be non-cultural as an individual or an organization.
True.
And there's cultural values that you're asking everybody to conform to.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And those values are usually prescribed by the dominant culture.
Okay.
Right? And so if I come from a non-dominant culture into that organization, I'm being asked to, assimilate. Not directly, probably.
Yeah. It's implicit.
But I find implicit that I conform. And you say, okay, well, we're colorblind. We don't see color here, but what you kind of miss out on is you've asked people to leave aspects of who they are culturally at the door for the sake of this assimilation, which you believe will lead you to most profitability.
So I'm just, I don't know if you and I have the experience, we at least have friends, surely, companies that have a takeover. And a takeover maybe by another nation. So I have a number of friends who've worked for an organization that used to be called Anheuser-Busch. Now it's called InBev. It's owned by Europeans and, I don't know, it's not Americans anymore. It's like Dutch and Brazilians or so. I don't know. I should have this in my head, but I don't. But it's not Americans.
That's right.
Anymore, and it's been hard on everybody.
Yes. How do you now?
I shouldn't say some people love it, of course, but
so a
lot of people are struggling. Right. This is a really different way of doing things.
That's right. And this is why.
So suddenly Americans are in the minority, sort of quasi-minority.
That's right. And you're answering to
somebody who has a different
overseas.
Yeah.
And they will send people
to help you understand. Right? The way we do things.
Now moving to the United States,
yes.
right? Whether it's Japan or Germany or some, right? You're coming now and you're bringing that cultural dynamic with you because the company is always operating with a set of assumed cultural values, which
aren't up for grabs constantly.
That's right.
This is the way it is.
This is the way that you conform or you
find another job, maybe. And it doesn't mean you're fired.
Right.
You become uncomfortable.
That's right. And so this is why in this pursuit, things like cultural intelligence matters. Now, the concept of cultural intelligence, there are ways to assess cultural intelligence and as a tool that I think is valuable for Christian organizations as well.
And you do that.
We do, yes, I do that. Because we say, listen, what you should aim for is the ability to appropriately and authentically bridge cultural differences by even adapting behavior, right?
And not expecting assimilation all the time.
In authentic and appropriate ways, in culturally authentic and appropriate ways, which involves two things, basically. It involves a deeper self-awareness.
Yes.
And a deeper other awareness, right? So I don't just grow by, let me learn more about your cultural background and
we'll
more
have
information.
A multicultural potluck dinner.
No, I have to start asking questions about my own our own formation.
Like how you view time, for example.
Right? Exactly.
Right.
Time, right? Time is more fluid, or, time is more structured.
Maybe there's not, each side might think the other is simply wrong.
That's right. Yes, that's right.
And it might be better to say, we view time differently.
We assign morality to the cultural values. Yeah.
You're messing with me now.
There's ethical and moral value that says it's not you're different, you're wrong.
Yes, right. Yeah.
And maybe even less than.
Well, and to go back to church, I mean, in European churches, if you start at 10, it is correct to end at 11.
That's correct. Yes.
And you aren't respecting people who have prepared a meal for 11:30, or we have a brunch reservation and you went to 11:16 and ruined everything. You monster.
Yes.
Whereas, I mean, when I've been in African American churches, they tend to go not only longer, but I mean, you can leave for 20 minutes and come back if you're hungry. It's not a problem.
That's right. That's exactly right.
If you left an Anglo church for 20 minutes, did you see Mr. Smith left church for 20 minutes? What did he mean by that? Right. Oh, he must be really mad.
That's right.
So this is good to talk about, but I want to hit a couple other things if I may. And, if you want to recoup some of these points, use the term racialized lens. Mm-hmm. It's an important term, which you've kind of been developing. But I like to challenge you a little bit on even the word race. Mm-hmm. And you and I agree biblically theologically that race is actually not a helpful category. Mm-hmm. Because there is one race, it's called the human race or humanity.
Yes.
And to say the black race, the brown race, the white race, the red race. One of the funniest things historically is for a while there were two races, blacks and white. Then they said, we have three. And we have yellow. And by the way, our Asian friends are not yellow. And furthermore, you're not black, and I'm not white. This is just
Furthermore.
for the camera. For the camera, this is white right here. This is white.
Right.
My skin is not. Never mind.
Yeah.
My skin is pinkish beige. It is not white.
Right.
His skin is not black.
This is black.
That's black. That's not a match.
Right. Right.
So and in Native Americans are not red.
Not red. No, not at all.
And then suddenly people started to go to Hawaii and Malaysia, and they said, "Ooh, maybe we need to color brown." And then one year they decided Hispanics weren't white anymore.
Right.
You're European until you come and settle in Mexico. Then you're not white anymore.
Then you're brown.
Then you're brown.
Yeah.
And so it's a very weird, and it's destructive, right? In certain ways.
Yes, that's right.
Just because it implies that you're a different kind of being. And you read these old accounts like a black man is cut and a white man sees a black man and his muscles are the same color, his blood's the same color. And it's almost shocking that we're actually the same.
That's right. Yes.
But you want to talk about race, and I understand. I'm not disagreeing with you. Mm-hmm. It's not a biblical concept, but we have to talk about it. That's your view. Explain that to us.
Yes. Yes. Here's why we have to talk about it.
Even though it doesn't exist.
Even though
it sort of doesn't exist.
It was created. It was It's a human invention.
Social construction we call it sometimes. Yep.
For the purpose of separation and oppression.
Domination.
Yes. For the purpose of othering and dominating people. Mm-hmm. But it has become so embedded in our lived reality in the world that we have to be able to communicate with people. And so to discard it, I think doesn't serve our ends well, because I need to be
creating dialogue and discourse.
Yes. And be able to say, so it's not as though when I have the conversations, particularly in Christian context, I will say, look, let's be clear. Mm-hmm. The Bible only knows one race, humanity.
Sons of Adam, daughters of Eve.
Yes. Right? And the separation is...
And by the way, they were probably kind of brown. They might have been kind of brown.
Considering
it's possible, at least.
They probably were not Scandinavian, But understand that this is what, and and the categories that essentially matter. Are you in Adam or are you in Christ?
Right. That's the real. There's two races actually in the Bible.
The covenant line.
Right. There's the race of Adam.
Which covenant head are you under?
In the race of Cain. Those are the two races.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so...
Or you're of your father, the devil, or you're children of God. Right. So that's another way to look at it.
So
that's stark.
That is stark. It's very stark.
Yep.
And very disturbing to talk about.
It is very disturbing, but it's more
accurate than to
black
say,
and white.
Red and yellow, black and white, all are precious in his sight. Right? We make songs about the racial categorizations that have been created, and that song in particular that we teach to children.
It's trying to collapse but it also promotes it also.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I want to be able to communicate well and dialogue and say, and I'll use the term black. Yes, I'm a, right? Okay, my African American, and I've already used it in this conversation.
Right.
Black people in America.
Right.
And I've used that categorization, and people will know what I'm talking about.
Right.
And if I start to not use it, then I have to go on and on and on and kind of explaining what I mean. Now, here's another issue that you'll hear people push back on this idea of racial reconciliation now. And these are particularly, here's another term, people of color, Christians of color.
Well, we all have a color.
Right.
But I know what you mean.
Right. A quick little...
White is a color, sort of.
Quick little aside.
Yeah, go ahead.
My first experience with racialized othering or racism I was a little boy. I was almost 10 years old. And I grew up in New York City, right? You know, all kinds of people in New York City.
Pretty multi-ethnic.
Yes, right? And so, but I hadn't experienced, you know, people in my school. My principal, I went to a private school. The principal was Indian, from India. Right. And so we're at Disney World in Florida on vacation. And we're, you know, we're playing in the pool, my sister and I. And there's a young white boy in the pool. And we're you know, we had these floats, and, you know, and he asked me to play with my float. I said, sure. And I asked him, can I play with yours? And he said to me, he said, no, because you're colored. Yeah. It's the first time I'd heard that language in my life.
And especially in the form of negation. Like, no, you can't. Yeah, you can share with me, but I can't share with you.
Yeah, I was confused, and I told my mother about it later, and Mom said, you know, somebody taught him that, right? Yes. This is not about you. And then I go back to school after the summer year. What did you do over the summer? Kind of, you know, and I explained this to my teacher, and my Indian American teacher says, well, here's the thing, white is a color too. You know, and he didn't get that, right? And so even the language, people of color, right? Well, who's
problematic?
Not?
Exactly.
It is.
That's right. Well, the other thing I don't like about, I prefer, as you know, we've talked about this, the language of ethnicity, culture, religion. That's where the Bible
or even nationality,
history, which gets into history. Yes. So, I mean, you know, the Hutus and the Tutsis and the, you know, Brazilians and Argentinians and the Serbs and the Croats. I mean, their skin colors are really close, and their cultures are close in like what they eat. Yes. And they can understand each other, but their history and nationality makes them diverge. But the other thing is that talk about, you know, black and white and, I don't know, yellow, whatever, obscures many things. So you're not simply an African American. Right. You're also Jamaican. You're an immigrant. People look at. Sorry. Trinidad. Sorry, I blew that one.
Yeah. That was. Let's be clear. Let's be clear.
Okay, there we go. There's a little nationality coming out, and you know, people look at me and think, well, you know, white guy, but I'm Irish. Irish were totally despised.
Yes.
And Jewish, and they were killed in the millions for being of the wrong religion, maybe curly hair and longer noses or something. Although you can't really rely on that.
Right. That's right.
Entirely either. And my own father obscured it. He would say, we're Russian. Well, yeah, we're Jews that settle in Russia. But in his mind, it was better to be Russian than Jewish because you aren't killed for being Russian.
Right.
That's right. You can be killed for being Jewish. And, you know, it kind of bugs me that people look at me and go, white guy, go like, it's not that simple. You know, I mean, I didn't grow up with an awareness of anti-Semitism much. I figured it out a lot later. Like, you know, when a teenager, I figured out, you know, I'm Jewish. And they make these jokes about Jews. They're not nice jokes.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And racial stereotyping or ethnic stereotyping about Jews. And, you know, most people have a story. And it's not just you're black, you're white.
Everybody's got a story.
Everybody has a story.
It's complex.
It's always complex.
Always complex.
Well, speaking of complex, some people try to make things real simple. And they say, Irwyn, we love you. We love what you're up to. But, I mean, honestly, if a church wants to be monocultural, why not let them be monocultural? What's the problem? I mean, a church is a volunteer organization, and it just so happens that we like to sort each other by our ethnic background. What would you say to that person who isn't being mean?
That's right. No,
they're sincerely saying, Irwyn, I appreciate what you do. I just don't see the point.
Yes.
What would you say?
So I'd say a couple, and I get this question often, you know, and usually it's in the form of, is there a problem within, you know, an ethnic, right, majority church? And I really try not to be dogmatic in the way that I you talk about beautiful community.
Right, which is the title of your book. We recommend the book. It's a good book. Thank you.
Here's what I say. Okay, because affinity does matter. Mm-hmm. And sometimes there are reasons in terms of affinity spaces, right? We don't have to work so hard.
Right. That's what my African-American friends tell me about going to a European church. Like, I don't want to solve your problem. Right. You feel bad that you're mono-ethnic.
Right. I don't want to be that.
I don't want to work hard to fit in, and I don't want you to feel like you're always working either, but mostly there's a desire. Go ahead.
And at the same time, no one gets a pass. No church or Christian gets a pass on what Jesus says is the greatest commandment. Love the Lord your God with everything. And love your neighbor as yourself. And you do not get to discriminate in terms of who's a neighbor. Who are your neighbors? And that are not a part of your ghetto.
Okay, all right. I wonder why you're hesitating.
And so who are your neighbors, and how has the Lord called you to extend love to them? If we're talking about churches, this might mean a greater intentionality of partnering in ministry, right?
Might not necessarily be worshiping together on Sunday morning,
congregational worship on Sunday morning.
School together, maybe.
You might do to begin striving to do some life on life work, because again, when we look at what the scriptures say to us, this is what the Spirit delights to do. When Jesus, in his high priestly prayers, ending the prayer, and he's praying, Father, let them be one, even as you are and I are one, I and them and you and me. Let them become perfectly one, so that the world may know that you sent me.
Yeah.
Right.
It's potent.
And he's not talking about, you just read the rest of the New Testament, he's not talking about mono-ethnic or monocultural oneness.
It's every kind.
It's every kind.
Which includes rich and poor, Jew and Gentile,
all of it.
Male and female.
That's right. And when you, the disorient of Isaiah 19, where the Lord through Isaiah is saying, there's a day coming that it's going to be an altar in Israel, in Egypt. There's going to be one in Assyria, and one in Israel. It's going to be, Egypt, my people, Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, my inheritance. Right. The Egyptians there's going to be a highway from Assyria to Egypt.
And these were the groups people knew best, and there was the most antagonism. I mean, these were oppressors, often, not all the time, but often. So I think I want to just set you up to affirm one thing, I think, but you can comment. So I live in a neighborhood, part of St. Louis, that has, I'm going to say maybe 35% Asian Americans, which they might come from India, they might come from China, they might come from Korea, and then maybe 30%, and then not very many Hispanics or African Americans, maybe 65% Anglo. So maybe our church would be expected in your mind to be, who should we have in our church in a neighborhood
that has
like
that diversity?
It's not highly diverse. It's really Asians and Europeans, mostly.
So
vast predominance.
It's tough to say the shoulds. Who ought?
What would you be happy? What would you be happy to see?
I would be happy to see the desire to pursue your neighbors well in terms of love. How are you engaging? So I'm about to use the word should, right? But I'm trying to avoid that word. I'm trying to get at the heart, that on the ground we have a heart to ask the question. Okay, here's another animating question. Where are the fractures? and the divides in this place that only the gospel can heal.
Okay.
Where are they?
I like that.
And how would the Lord have us lean into those fractures? Right. And so that cuts across ethnic lines. Mm-hmm. It cuts across socioeconomic lines, because you can have a mostly mono-ethnic community, but still have fractures and divides, because we specialize as we fallen human beings. We specialize in divisions.
Or you could have a multicultural church that's all of one social
all of one social stratum. That's and those are often the easiest.
Yes, right.
Right, to bring together.
I'm so much closer to my fellow believers who are black and highly educated than I am Anglos who have a 6th grade education.
Absolutely.
I mean, we have a much easier time.
And so that's exactly right. And so that's the ought and the shoulds are around. Where are the divides that the gospel heals?
I love it. That's really great.
And how do we lean into those? So it might not
be... Which includes race for sure.
So it might not be that, okay, my community is, 60% Anglo, 20% African American, 20% other. And so I'm expecting every congregation to have a 60-20 mix.
No, that's not very realistic.
But I am saying, okay, are these dividing lines that show up? So, St. Louis,
yes,
right? There's history.
There is,
right? And so, what is our pursuit of love in Jesus' name that seeks to heal those divides, because they've been deep, they've been long,
and they persist.
Yes, and they persist.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's right. Yeah. Irwyn, I want to hit some quickies.
Okay.
I feel like we've had this conversation, but you said some things in a fresh way.
Okay.
I read your book. I loved your book, but I feel like I'm learning by spending a little time with you. What moved you? You were a pastor. You were an engineer.
Yes.
Then you're a pastor.
Right.
You're still a pastor, you're working in a particular. What would you say to somebody who is a pastor? A lot of pastors don't stay pastors their whole life.
That's right, yeah.
Right? That is to say, leading a church type pastor. What would you say to somebody who's an engineer, who thinks maybe God called him to something else? Or to a pastor who thinks, I've served in my local church, but I'm called to something else. How did you come to the conviction that God was leading you into this? And I'm not asking for your story this time. I'm asking you to talk to a 38-year-old who maybe is, what would you say to somebody who's thinking, maybe God's leading me to something else? A couple points of advice.
Sure. First thing, your identity and dignity and worth are not based on what you do.
Okay. Even though our society says it is.
That's right. You have because very often I'm an engineer. Mm-hmm. And so that has a substantive formative effect.
It's positive.
On who I consider myself to be. And doing something different that maybe doesn't have as much gravitas, in the eyes of
cultural value.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to, because I've got, and this for me, right? Yes, not my, but this is a particular struggle that I think we all have to engage, this issue of identity. When I was a pastor, yes, I'm still pastoring, but I'm directing a ministry now. Mm-hmm. And when that shift happened, I went through this process. I've been so used to seeing myself as a pastor, and there's great value there to say, "Oh, am I now
love
losing?" So God gets to call. Mm-hmm. We do get to choose.
We're free agents.
We're free. That's right. That's exactly right. Yes. Mm-hmm. God gets to call, and in that, there's always the question of identity. There's always the question of who am I?
So you're saying don't overdo that.
I'm saying
recognize it, but don't let that tie you down, bind you.
I'm saying overdo it in this sense.
Okay.
That my identity is in Christ.
Yes, right.
That my value is I'm a beloved child of the King.
Not because you're an engineer or pastor.
Right.
Which of course addresses racial and ethnic issues.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Right.
Yeah. So I would so that's the first thing I would say. And the second thing I would say relates to, and I just had this conversation with someone yesterday, relates to the question of fear. And it's this, okay, in this, if I'm thinking of a shift, right, we're often thinking in practical terms, right? Okay, I have to know, okay, if money wasn't an issue, what would I do?
Yep.
If where I lived wasn't an issue, what would I do? If all of these, now you still have to have those considerations, right?
You want to lay them aside.
Can I lay them aside
for a little while
and say, okay, because I'm trying to get at the heart of the passion and the desire. If these practical things that I do have to think about were not there,
what would I
do?
Yeah. What do I think God's summoning me to do with the bulk of my energy? Because we can. My last podcast was with an artist who said, "Look, most artists don't make their full-time living out of being an artist. Now, if you can, good for you." And he does essentially, although it's more complicated than that. But you may just be an artist 4 hours a week. That's fine too.
Yes.
But sometimes our passion does align with our work that we do 40 or 50 or whatever.
That's right.
Number of hours. Thank you for that answer. So I'm going to go through some quick lightning questions.
Okay.
You know what? These are coming, right?
Yes, I do know.
So here we go. So question number 1, what do you do to play or relax?
I am a CrossFit and kettlebell enthusiast. So I don't know if you call that relaxing. It is, but I love it.
It's a hobby.
It is a hobby.
High intensity.
I coach functional fitness, and I coach.
I love that term.
Kettlebell. Yeah.
Yeah. So just for the crowd, CrossFit does not mean you're angry when you're fit. It means you learn to do things.
That's right.
So fitness is the ability to do the things you want to do. That's kind of the definition with CrossFit, right?
That's right.
So you do things like roll tires around.
Yeah, that's right.
In case you want to roll a tire.
Barbells,
but if you just do lifting weights endlessly, you tone some muscles, but you aren't necessarily fit for life.
That's right. It's about longevity. Functionally,
And not how fast you run a mile necessarily.
Can I be elderly and sit down in a chair and stand back up on my own?
Yeah, right. That's good. Stop talking about
okay,
me.
Sorry. That's right. This is lightning.
No, I'm referring to myself as an elderly person in prospect. Okay, so that's good. Kettlebells are awesome.
I love them.
And maybe you'll give me some tips. I'm just barely getting into kettlebells. Okay. A little bit. I also believe in, just pull-ups and push-ups.
Absolutely, yes.
And the stuff you can do on the floor, planks.
Air squat, body weight squats.
All those good things.
All of those things.
Also, throwing children in the air.
Yeah.
Very natural exercise.
Yes.
Grandchildren,
Well, again,
around.
Functional.
It's functional,
I want to be able to
throw my grandchildren in the air.
Play with my grandchildren.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a good one. All right, number 2. Putting all practical considerations aside, what would you do for a year if you could do anything? Would you be a kettlebell instructor?
I would. Yeah. I would dive heavily into that world. It would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I would. I've kind of fallen in love with kettlebells, and I think it's something that
you're a big guy.
Yeah.
God gave you a big, strong body, and you want to take care of it and not let it atrophy.
Yes, that's right. But I also love serving other people. I love the opportunity to coach and train others.
And we also are holistic.
We are holistic. Yes.
We're not just souls that happen to inhabit a body. Yes. We are body-soul unities.
That's right.
And this is the one instrument God's given us to play with.
That's right.
The saxophone is outside. This is inside. All right, good. We agree on that. I've been a coach a little bit too.
Okay.
Not a kettlebell coach, but I've coached other athletes a little bit at times. All right. If you had a talented newcomer who said, Dr. Ince, loved your book, love what you're doing. I want to be involved in this field of multicultural beauty. Can I use that? Is that a fair way of describing what you do? And holistic integration, not just blacks and whites, but every group, all ethnic groups and cultural groups. I want to be like you. What are two things you would tell somebody?
I would do the first thing I've said already is...
You can repeat it though.
Yes, I will.
Okay, great.
is do the work of growing in your own cultural self-awareness.
Yes.
Right? There's ways to go about that. Develop your own cultural self-awareness, right? Deepen that. And then figure out, what does this look like? Kind of what are the practical things I desire? Is this person? Are you talking about pastoring in a local congregation? Are you talking about leading a ministry? Are you talking about working vocationally in the business world? What is the specificity of the calling in terms of location?
And it could be as simple as, let's say, a Hispanic woman who notices that there are a lot of fractures in her workplace.
Yes, right.
She's still going to be an engineer.
Yeah, that's right.
But she just wants to help things out.
That's exactly right. Yes, that's exactly right. It doesn't mean, I've got to leave and now come into pastoral ministry and do. That's the way.
Right.
No.
Yeah. No. She could be what we call an informal leader.
An informal
as opposed to a formal leader.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, question number 4. What do people get wrong about your work? And what would you say to get them right about your work?
Here's what people get wrong about my work in the current moment. That we are, promoting Marxist ideology and critical race theory.
Yep.
This is such a heated moment in our own society that people think many people believe that when you start to talk about issues of being in a racialized society, we talk about addressing injustice as a part of living out the implications of the gospel. People believe that you now have a political agenda in terms of American politics.
And maybe a dangerous political
dangerous
agenda,
one.
Like left-wing
Marxist, and you're starting to give up.
Give up the faith, you mean?
Yeah, you're starting to give up your commitment
to Christ. You're giving to politics. Huh?
Yeah.
How many times do words like justice and righteousness appear in the Bible?
I should have that number down.
It's hundreds.
It's
hundreds. So when people ask me, why do you talk about justice? I'm like, I want to say, well, I do Bible exposition and the word turns up
exactly right.
from time to time.
Exactly right.
Actually, pretty often.
That's right.
Well, especially if you do justice, righteousness, equity shows up occasionally. It doesn't quite mean what we mean by equity today, but translations use other words that have to do with fairness and no bribes, judges treat everybody fairly.
That's right.
Those are all justice issues that show up literally hundreds of times.
Yes.
So
hundreds of times.
Hundreds of times. Yeah, we're not making it up because we read it in Marx. No. The truth is, Marx got it from Hegel, who got it from the Bible. Realistically, I mean, he perverted it.
Yeah. And that is why we always ground our work in what the scriptures say.
Yep.
And
back to race, for example.
Back to race, right.
Yep.
Right.
Good. Other than your own book, what book would you have people read if they wanted to dig into this topic? Your, again, is Beautiful Community.
The Beautiful Community.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
But what else would you have people read?
I think some helpful books.
Oh, I didn't ask for books. I asked for one book.
Okay.
2. You get 2.
I get 2. Okay. I'm going to give you 2.
Okay, 2.
I'm really going to recommend The Color of Compromise by Jamar Tisby.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's approachable, relatively succinct for a history. There are things that
it's not massive.
It's not massive.
It's accessible and deep enough. Certainly.
And deep enough to get into say, okay, particularly understanding how the church has engaged or not issues of race in the United States. And the second book is actually not a book about justice, and well, it is a little bit, but Andy Crouch's book Strong and Weak.
Okay.
Here's why it applies. I love his simple 2x2 matrix. He just says, look, on the y-axis is authority, on the x-axis is vulnerability.
Okay.
And so you have these 4 quadrants, and the more authority you have, the more you need to embrace vulnerability if there's going to be flourishing.
Okay.
Vulnerability is going to be embraced no matter what. Somebody's going to bear that. So if you're lower in vulnerability, in authority, and high in vulnerability, that's suffering and oppression.
That's trouble.
That's trouble, right? And so it's a way of thinking about yourself and the people who you're around. Where are they? If low authority, low vulnerability, just means I've kind of like opted out.
Yeah, right. I've got my little enclave.
That's right.
I play video games.
That's right. High authority, low vulnerability is dominance on the opposite side.
It can be oppressive.
It can be oppressive.
Not necessarily, but
yes. It's like I'm the dominant. I have high vulnerability, high authority, but I'm not embracing any vulnerability.
Right.
So I'm dominating. The people opposite me are being oppressed, right? And so I think it's a small book. It's just really another book that's accessible that helps us think about, particularly think about authority well.
It's good. He has a lot of authority.
Yeah.
Because of his standing. Yes. He's a great thinker. People read his work.
Absolutely.
Last question. Who should I interview next?
Oh, gosh.
And if you really care about it, will you introduce me to that person?
Yeah, I mean, now I could easily say Alex Jun.
Yeah,
but you already know that. He's already on the list.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that you should interview Kelly Brown. Do you know Kelly Brown?
Not yet.
Okay. Kelly Brown is at Christ Central in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay.
She is the wife of Howard Brown, who pastors. And
I know Howard Brown.
Yeah. You know Howard.
Yeah. So I guess I kind of know her.
Yeah.
Or should or something.
Yes, maybe. But yeah, I think you should interview her.
Irwyn, I always enjoy talking to you.
This has been excellent.
Thank you for giving your time.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
I hope we can keep partnering on some things.
Well, we will keep working on. Is African American, Asian American, Irish Jew? Is that the order of our working?
I don't know. We don't have a title. That's the subtitle.
The subtitle, yes. Yeah. Something. I just think, yes. We're going to be continuing that.
We are. In fact, tomorrow I think, or
That's
Thursday.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, we're getting together again.
Yeah.
So that'll be good. But thank you for your time, and thank you for your ministry, and for your heart, and for putting your knowledge and your heart together.
Thanks, man.
All right.
All right.
Working with Dan Doriani is a production of the Center for Faith and Work St. Louis. We seek to promote faithfulness in the workplace, in education, in discipleship, and in the stories of believers who've applied their faith at work. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and rate us on your preferred podcast platform. You can visit our website at faithandworkstl.org. There you can subscribe to our podcast, sign up for our newsletter, learn more about Faith and Work cohorts, leave us a message, and more. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Faith and Work STL, and find the video version of this show on our YouTube channel. All these links are available in the podcast show notes and on our website. Thanks for listening.